Right. So hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great time in beautiful Paris. My name is Juliette Chevalier. I am not French. But today I will speak to you about the smart contracts behind building DAOs. I'm a developer advocate for Aragon, and we've been doing lots of research to come to some potentially interesting conclusions about where the ecosystem is headed and what are some of the implications about our behaviors on the technical trade-offs that we've been doing for our contracts. So first off, I think it'll be good to provide a little background about who we are and why we were born and what we've been up to until now. So originally, Aragon was born back in 2017, in many ways to provide some clarity as to the confusion that existed regarding what DAOs were and how they could be implemented. So we built a very good tool where you could create a DAO within 5 minutes. You go into a button, create DAO, you input your parameters, you decide what type of organization you want to be building, and immediately you'll have a DAO deployed and created for you. Now, this was very revolutionary in its time because it allowed you to have all of it together. And realistically, since then, the ecosystem has changed enormously. Within the past year, we saw a rise of DAOs of 13x. We have now almost 5,000 DAOs created, around 4 million token holders, billions of dollars in transactions and value locked in treasuries and market cap. And so it's certainly been interesting to see what happens in the ecosystem within the bulls and the bears. And certainly, being around since that time, has provided really insightful research and lessons about what are some consistencies and patterns that we're seeing across the board. Now, I would say that one of the most important and certainly striking lessons that we've had throughout the journey has been understanding that when it comes to the ground of it all, DAOs are doing a wide variety of actions, but on the meta level, they're essentially just permission management systems. Now, let's deconstruct potentially a bit more what that means. So if we go back to the roots of the definitions of DAOs, and I'm sure there'll be some DAO police in the room, but realistically, DAOs usually will contain 3 main pillars. And the center of it all, of course, stands the community. So the community are the contributors, they are the stakeholders, they are the users that are utilizing the projects and the initiatives that these DAOs are outputting. Now, of course, if the community wants to run initiatives, then that means that they need a treasury and they need funds. So at the second pillar, we have the treasury, which holds the assets. And in order to use the assets, we then need a coordination layer, which is what we usually understand as the governance mechanisms and the different types in which these communities are making decisions and performing these initiatives. Now, throughout our research, a lot of what has come up is that it's not as crystal clear as simply like 3 main pillars or a roadmap that every organization follows to get to be a successful DAO, right? This is realistically a process. And it's a process that varies very much from organization to organization. A lot of our data shows that builders today are taking anywhere from 6 months to a year before they get to a point of establishing and creating their own DAO. This means that some of them may start from a governance perspective, other ones start because they already have a treasury that they want to distribute in a specific way. And so even the entry points out of which these DAOs are being created are certainly fluid and distinct to the different organizations that are rising today. And so what ends up happening is that we're able to reach certain conclusions. On the first level, the ecosystem is highly complex. I don't think this is new for anyone, but realistically, it comes to a spot where we're in such a nascent era of the DAO ecosystem, and there is so much information to signal ratio and noise that it can be very hard to dissect precisely which tools do you need, what are they for, and how to use them. And so on an initial level, builders certainly need more simple understanding of a roadmap of a process. On a second level, the tools that were, the frameworks that were built before were in many ways monolithic. They were opinionated. So they provided templates and apps as to how to build a DAO as a company, how to build a DAO as an NGO. And the reality today is that it's a lot more modular than that. There's niche use cases that are arising every day, and we need to provide a framework that allows for those innovations to arise, even for use cases that we haven't thought about today. And because these organizations are evolving throughout time, they are also certainly not static. They need to be adaptable, and they need to be evolving constantly, even within an ecosystem and a technology that deploys smart contracts that may be immutable and not overchanging over time. And so when it comes really to that definition of what makes a DAO, yes, we may spot some patterns, right? They're making collective decisions, they're depositing and withdrawing funds, they're executing actions. But at the meta level of it all, they're managing permissions, right? Who is able to perform which action and why? Why is one contract able to deploy assets? Why is one person able to withdraw assets? And who decides who is able to do all these actions? And so what we're building is not this monolithic sort of way of doing things, because the ecosystem is ever evolving, but rather we're attempting to build the Legos, right? The building blocks that then allow the communities and the people building these organizations to deploy whatever type of DAO they want. And so realistically, it looks like this. At the core of our contracts, we have the DAO contract, which is acting in many ways as the treasury. It has a withdraw function, it has a deposit function, it sets up the metadata of the DAO, the name, the description, the logo, all of sort of the core aspects of deploying a DAO instance. But the heart of the contracts is realistically not as much the DAO contract as it is the ACL. And ACL stands for Access Control List. This is the permission management. It's the one that is able to grant roles to different contracts or externally owned addresses. It's the one that revokes them. It's the one that frees them. And who is it granting these permissions to? Plugins. And so plugins is really where the actions are happening. The DAO contracts themselves are essentially the building block that then gives permissions to plugins out of a wide array of options. And we're going to see an example. So let's say I am a builder. I go in and I want to create a DAO. I'm with some friends. We're doing some funky treasury stuff. And so I want to be able to hold assets together and trade them, swap them, stake them, do some interesting things. Now, realistically, we're a Telegram group. We are 3 friends. We don't need something too complex. So maybe we're not ready for governance yet. But we still want to have the functionalities of a treasury and be able to do a variety of actions with it. So I get into the app UI, the interface, and I call the Create DAO button. At that point, I create a DAO with a name, a description, a logo. I know that I want to be swapping tokens. I know that I want to be staking assets. And so at that front, I call the SDK, which is our software development kit, which calls into our contracts and creates a DAO instance with the plugins and the metadata that I stated when I first created it. So what this means is that now I have a DAO instance that with 2 different plugins, and the plugins have the execution role. And because they have the execution role, then they're able to perform certain actions like depositing, like swapping, like staking. Now, building a plugin should be as easy as this. As long as you have the role that you want to be giving to that plugin, you can then initialize it and do something with it. You can create wherever action you want it, and whoever has the role to perform that action is able to execute it. And this is critical because every DAO is unique. We cannot try to envision the amount and the types of organizations that are going to come around. We don't want to build only for the first 1,000 DAOs. We're building for the next 10,000 DAOs, in whichever shape or form those come in. And so this brings up interesting benefits. On one level, we're saving gas, right? You shouldn't be able to you shouldn't be paying for things that you're not using, and that is critical to allowing organizations to evolve. On the second level, these organizations are adapting through time, which means that contracts should have upgradability, but realistically, we don't envision many projects doing that because you're better off just revoking permissions from one contract and granting permissions to another. So we're really grabbing into that mentality that the only constant within organizations is change. On a third level, because it's opinionated, you're really empowering any feature to come around, understanding that organizations are different and unique. And in the fourth level, because we have sort of that open system and that flexible architecture, we're really creating a framework that allows for solving problems that we can't really envision today. So ultimately, the ecosystem looks like this. We do have the Aragon protocol as the base that is the smart contracts that will fuel both the integrations and the app and the interfaces. We're building one of the interfaces, but nothing stops any of you from building another interface on top of it. And ideally, we have an ecosystem of integrations and plugins that then allows builders to create their DAO as they need at whichever stage of the project they are. Now, classic question, what's the status on this? So certainly we're in alpha level. Our contracts, I would say, are almost done. We're working on some refactoring. We're moving on to a next step of working on the SDK to allow the interface to adapt to it. Our interface is also in a fluent state. And so the next step is opening this up to the world. You can already see it on GitHub and map out the progress, as well as we're building a really strong developer portal, which should support developers in building plugins in a super quick time frame. So if you want to check out more, please sign up for our alpha testing. We really want builders to try it out, give us their feedback, build stuff on top of it, tell us what works and what doesn't. And having that said, we're also hiring. So if this is something that's interesting to you, please feel free to apply and help us in building this vision. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thanks, guys. See you around.